The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gam Podcast Network is brought to you by Morning Fantasy. The recommended customers play just $5, get hundreds of wins funds. Use promo code SGPN. And welcome everyone to the Tennis Gam Podcast here on the Sports Gam Podcast Network. It is currently early Saturday morning around 1 a.m. Eastern, October 25th. I'm your host, as always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Time to get into the semifinal matchups taking place in Basel and in Vienna to break down all four of those matchups in a few minutes. Before we get into the actual breakdown of those matches, a reminder, you support the show by liking and subscribing on YouTube, and a reminder, also rating and review on Spotify or Apple. So podcasts you can find here on YouTube or even on Spotify and Apple if you want audio only. So once again, you can check it out a couple of ways. We'll leave you a rating and a review on Spotify or Apple, and leave a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to help the channel grow. Plus, a reminder, we also have some merch on the SGPN website. We have a lot of great tennis merch. We have sweatshirts, we have t-shirts, we have mugs. So check it out. Different colors, very comfortable, and then they're very cheap. So I recommend getting yourself something on the store. Plus, a reminder, we also have other shows in the network, including the NBA Gambling Podcast, a show that I'm also on, doing shows Monday through Friday, covering NBA action during the weekdays. So if you do want some thoughts on NBA games, we cover every game. We throw in some player prop analysis too, and wrap up the shows with lock and dog picks like in this show. But check out the NBA Gambling Podcast on YouTube or on Spotify, or wherever you do get your podcast. So starting off with the recap of the lock and dog for the quarterfinals. Overall good for us. Was not officially a sweep, but we went undefeated. So for the lock, had a void. We had Chapo team total over 12.5 at -120. He looked really good early. Won the first set. Then he had, I believe it was multiple break points in the first return game of the second set. He lost, and then he fell apart, simply put. Now, Chapo had 9 games entering the third set, and he was serving first. So he actually was in a decent spot to potentially cover. Then his body betrayed him, and he mentally checked out. But he ended up quitting, so the play ended up voiding, as Fonseca did win in 2.5 sets. Thought it might go 3, so in hindsight, maybe I should have taken the over instead. But either way, team total did end up voiding, as he ended up losing via retirement in the third set. For the dog, though, nice and easy. We went back to the Opelka well, took the Opelka first set over 10.5 against Humbert at +112. Never in doubt, no break points, as straightforward as possible. In fact, there was only one game with break points in the entire match. And coincidentally, the final game of the match where Humbert broke and won in straight sets. But the first set at plus money for Opelka on these courts in Basel, it was a joke. The guy can't return. He serves phenomenally. And Humbert eventually got through, but it took a set and a half. So the first set was never in doubt, no break points at all, and it went to a breaker. So a nice, easy win there for the Dogs. So not exactly a sweep like the previous episode, but still undefeated. I'll try to keep it rolling here in the semis of Basel and Vienna. So recapping what happened in the matchups on Friday. First things first, I'll save the Basel stuff for last. I'll do Vienna first. Vienna was pretty straightforward. You ended up seeing de Minaur beat Berrettini in straight sets. Thought Berrettini maybe could give de Minaur a run for his money if he did not play a 3+ hour marathon against Norrie the day prior. It scared us off, and de Minaur ended up winning. If you took the team total at around 13 flat, you chopped, but either way, Berrettini looked bad early, settled in, but de Minaur was too solid, and Berrettini did lose in straight sets. Griekspoor didn't show up, ended up having some type of injury, and ended up having to walk over. So you ended up seeing, or withdraw, Zverev got the walkover into the semis. Sinner beat Bublik in straight sets, but Bublik did cover the 4.5 games. Sinner ended up winning 6-4, 6-4, and Musetti ended up beating Mutet 6-3, 6-4. No drama at all. We were robbed of one match because, once again, Griekspoor could not physically show up for the matchup. However, that was actually the better of the two events on Friday, because Basel, of course, had 4 quarterfinal matchups on Friday. 3 of them ended prematurely via retirement. So only one match was fully completed in Basel. I feel bad for the guys with tickets. I think they should deserve some type of refund or something. But either way, Munar ended up beating Felix in one set. Felix quit after losing the first set. Fonseca, said before, was up 4-1 in the third, and then Chapo ended up quitting. So you had 2 straight retirements. Humbert ended up beating Opelka in a pretty fun straight set matchup. But either way, once again, no break points for the entire match until the final game of the match. And then Fekina beat Ruud in the first set in a tiebreak, and Ruud ended up quitting after getting injured in the middle of the first set. So overall, a really bad look for the ATP Tour. We talk about how tough the schedule actually is and how players, de Minaur especially, have complained about how difficult and strenuous the actual travel is with the actual playing, and how there's not enough off time for the players. And including the matchups in Vienna, 4 of the 8 matches ended early, either via retirement or via walkover. And there's a 1,000 event next week in Paris. So once again, I think the players might be onto something. I'm not saying that there are too many tournaments available, because in theory you can technically avoid them if you want to. At the same point, though, it does feel like these players aren't really given any time to recover at all, and that's why a bunch of guys get hurt towards the end of the week. They're playing every day at this point, and they feel like their bodies are kind of betraying them, and they want to save their energy for the 1,000 event in Paris taking place over the next week. So, yes, the counterpoint is, if you're really concerned about that, then why are you playing these events? The answer is simple. You need the points for the ATP Finals in Turin. You have a couple of people who are fighting for spots. Felix, for example, Ruud, for example, de Minaur, for example, even though de Minaur is still active, Musetti as well. You forget how much money is involved in simply making the ATP Finals, and the fact is you have a bunch of guys who are fighting for as many points as possible in order to clinch a spot in the top 8. And it does feel like, based on the current schedule, a lot of guys are running out of gas. I feel like that's kind of the, I'd say, main takeaway for me with all the retirements and walkovers. It does feel like the calendar might be a bit too stacked, and I don't know if the answer is, you can't really remove tournaments. I don't know if the answer is extending the calendar season and then maybe having less of a layoff, but that doesn't really solve anything, because that just gives players less time to recover before the start of next calendar season. But it's going to be tough when you have another event coming up in Paris. You have the finals coming up in Turin in a couple of weeks as well. The tennis schedule is very tough, and it feels like a lot of the players, especially ones that are competing for a spot in Turin, needing every ranking point possible. It does feel like the schedule is definitely not doing them any favors, and that's why we have seen so many guys quit over the last couple of weeks. But it's a bad look, especially for Basel, when you have paying customers and 3 of the 4 matches end in injury. That's not a good look for the tournament. We'll see if the actual fans get compensated, but it's a bad look. Nothing else to really add there. But once again, pretty underwhelming set of matches, because only 1 match went to a deciding set. Every other match ended in either 1 or 2. So really no drama at all. And even for upsets, I mean, Fokina beat Ruud, that was an upset. Munar beat Felix, which was an upset. But those were both retirement victories. In terms of full matches that were completed, every favorite won in straight sets. So really not any drama at all. But the calendar I had to mention, a lot of injuries, especially in Basel. And hopefully people stay healthy for the semifinal matchups taking place on Saturday. Anyway, time to move on into the matchups taking place on Saturday. Before we get into those matches, a reminder, they're brought to you by our sponsor, which is ADVERTISE. Season's a bet on football, tennis, basketball, hockey, you name it, baseball if you want World Series action. A reminder, though, you can also use crypto for funding your account and for getting nice payouts. Use the link by ADVERTISE. Use the promo code SGPN for 100% bet back bonus up to $500 for new customers. ADVERTISE promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Novig, the number 1 prediction market for sports in America, getting some great prices with Novig. And it's also available in 35 states, so you should make sure it's available in your state. Also, download the Novig app. $50 and spend just $5 if use our promo code SGPN. Get on the actual Novig promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the recap of the quarters. Time to move on into the preview of the matchups taking place on Saturday. So starting off with the matches taking place, we're going to go with Basel first. They're both starting at the same time, but Basel alphabetically will do them first. So for the matchups here, first one's going to be between Munar and Fonseca. Not the match you expected for a semis of a hardcourt event at this stage in the season, but either way, Fonseca's favored -140. Munar is +120. For the spread, -1.5 for Fonseca, +1.5 for Munar. The over-under is at around 22.5, juiced, or 23.5. So depending on whatever number or price you want, you can choose between the two of those. So Fonseca in straight sets available at +170. Munar in straight sets is available at +250. The over 2.5 sets is around plus 130. So for the matchup, for the history between the two of them, pointing out there is no history, so I can't really mention that. Now Fonseca has been looking good, ended up beating Pericard in the first round, then got pretty lucky and beat Mensik, who ended up not showing up because of injury. So Mensik ended up having to retire or withdraw from the event. So Fonseca got a walkover. Then Chapo got hurt, and Fonseca won in 2.5 sets. So Fonseca's played one full match in the entire event. Munar, though, did get lucky as well, as Felix, two-time champion, ended up having to retire with injury. Makes sense, though, as Felix did win the title last week in Brussels. So I guess that caught up to him. But either way, beat Shelton in straight sets and beat Bertola in straight sets. So for the matchup, different styles of play. We know Munar has been quite good compared to his normal, I'd say, record on hard court in most previous seasons. To this year, he's been great on different surfaces. He's had more firepower, more consistency, and it does feel like he's starting to piece together a decent portion of his game. So number one, an ATP title, and Fonseca has. So technically, Fonseca has a bit, you could argue, less pressure in the spot because he's actually been to a final and won before. But either way, Fonseca, with the fast-paced courts in Basel, arguably has the advantage stylistically because Munar does rely more on a consistent baseline approach. Fonseca has more of a firepower angle, and I do think he can try to push and bully Munar around the court. Now, it does kind of have a double-edged sword there because on one hand, Fonseca can hit winners and dominate points. The other hand, errors can be a problem, and we saw that in the first set against Chapo, as Chapo buried him early in that first set before falling apart physically. But either way, for the matchup in itself, I think it's going to be close. I don't think that Fonseca is going to coast to a nice win. At the same point, I think Fonseca is better equipped to handle the speed of these courts. Munar's serve has gotten a bit better. Still not great. Neither guy's a great server. But Fonseca does have more firepower, and I do think he should be able to force more break points, in my opinion, over the course of this matchup. I think it's going to be close, though. Don't mind the over for the actual games. I don't mind the team total for Fonseca at 12.5. I can see a breaker happening, or maybe even a 7-5 or a 3-setter. So I'll go with Fonseca, who I think should win. Munar in third sets has not really been great over the last year or so. So I think Fonseca might outlast him in 3, but I do think it's going to be close. Give me Fonseca team total over as my cop-out answer, because there are a couple ways to get there. Either he wins a close straight-set battle, he wins in 3, or he even loses in a close 3-set battle. Couple of scripts, but I think Fonseca should be favored. Minus 140 might seem a bit high. Maybe you feel like that should be minus 130, give or take. But I'll go for the team total instead for this one. Moving on to the next matchup. Look at the matchup between Humbert and Fekina. For this one, Humbert's a massive favorite. Minus 170. Fekina's around plus 145. For the actual spread, plus 2.5 for Fekina, minus 2.5 for Humbert, minus 120 on the Fekina side. For the over-under, 22.5 or 23.5. So once again, shop around, find the price or number you want. For the straight set wager, Humbert in straight sets plus 150. Fekina to win straight sets is plus 250. The over 2.5 sets is around plus 125. So for the history, they actually faced off on hard court in the past, faced off last year in Marseille, and Humbert won in straight sets. I'll point out, though, of course, that was in the home country of Humbert. I believe he won the title of that event. But either way, Fekina did win the previous matchup in Montpellier via retirement against Humbert. So they have had a couple of mixed results on hard court. I am going to point out that it is tied 2-2 in the head-to-head, splitting clay and splitting on hard court. So for the actual path so far, Humbert's been great. We saw Humbert lose to Ruud in Stockholm, aged pretty well because Ruud won the title, and that was the title match, actually. So Humbert made the final and then ended up having no ill effects of it, like we saw with Felix, for example, or Leheshka, who made the final and then immediately either no-showed or had to retire in their respective matchups because they were exhausted. Not an issue for Humbert. Lost in the final to Ruud handily, came here, beat Korda in straight sets, beat Fritz in straight sets, and beat Opelka in straight sets. For Fekina, a bit of a weirder path. Ended up beating Sonego in straight sets, beat Brooksby in a marathon as he won in 3, and beat Ruud in 1 set and a retirement. So for the matchup in itself, I do think that the line feels disrespectful to Fekina. Now, I understand Humbert has been in great form. He beat Fritz, he beat Opelka, beat some big servers, and Fekina is nowhere near that caliber of server. So you might argue Humbert might force a bunch of breakpoints and might find a way to win. I do recognize that he's a very good hardcourt player, especially indoors. However, I think 170 feels massive to me. I do think you're looking at a spot where I just see it being close. We know that Fokina has the overall variety and the overall backhand ability to frustrate Humbert. And I am going to point out that a pretty crazy stat here. Fokina's actually a demon against lefties. For Fokina's last 10 matches against lefties, he's 10 and 0. 10 and 0. In his last 20 matches against lefties, he's 18 and 2 straight up. 18 and 2. Now, coincidentally, one of the two losses was against Humbert. Go figure. But the point is, Fokina historically has been very good against lefties, which makes me think this line feels a bit, I'd say, rough towards Fokina. I think that it's pretty generous to Fokina. I think that Humbert should be favored, but I think it's minus 130. I think Humbert's been very good, but I'm not going to overreact to a matchup against Opelka. And Opelka, we know, can't return to save his life. I think that Fokina and Humbert are going to generate break points, a lot of them. And I do think whoever's the last guy standing wins. But I do think it's going to be close either way. I don't mind the over in this one. I do think you might see a breaker in this one as well. But Fokina, with his numbers against lefties, I think has some value at this current price. The line feels expensive. I'll take a shot with it. I am going to go with the Fokina angle here for the value alone. I think 145 is pretty generous of a price. I'll take it for value. I don't see much on Humbert to win this match at minus 170. I see Dom mentioning that, like Humbert, would be very Fokina of him to win the title when nobody thinks he could, or he loses in the final. Either or. I feel like Fokina can do both, but I just think the line's expensive at minus 170. I'll go with the dog here for the price alone. Moving on to the next matchup in Vienna. Going to switch gears here. So moving on to de Minaur against Sinner, which is complete domination in the head-to-head. Sinner is 11-0 lifetime. We saw de Minaur win a set, though, in the last meeting. Good for him. Did eventually lose in 3. One of the best matches de Minaur ever played through 2 sets. And still, he had to go to the, I'd say, the depths of hell to actually win that second set. Then he ran to gas and got buried in the third set. Sinner, though, minus 850. Sounds about right. De Minaur's plus 580. For the spread, you minus 5.5 for Sinner. You plus 5.5 for de Minaur. For the over-under, 19.5. At the end of the day, the question is, do I think de Minaur has a chance? The answer is no. I think Sinner's going to kill him. I think Sinner is a guy who is too good on these courts. I said in the preview episode of the event, I was not going to take Sinner at minus 188. However, I did say if your book had it, take Sinner to win the actual event without dropping a set. We're still here in the semis, and he has been coasting. Bublik, we know, is a very good player in hard court, big serve, and Sinner beat him like he was nothing, winning 6-4, 6-4. I get de Minaur has been very good over the last couple months. At the same point, though, de Minaur played an insane match in the head-to-head in Beijing. Won a set. Sinner won the title anyway. It didn't matter. De Minaur got a moral victory, winning 1 set there, but he played out of his mind in that actual match, and he still lost. Sinner owns him. It's 11-0. I don't see that changing. I think Sinner curb stomps him. And I do think that even though de Minaur was able to win against Berrettini in straight sets, and even though he was able to win every match so far, not dropping a set, the schedule has been favorable. I mean, he ended up beating Rodionov, who was a relative unknown Austrian, beat Misalic, who's a clay specialist, beat Berrettini, who was off a 3+ hour marathon and came out flat in the first set. As for Sinner, you're looking at Bublik, Kaboli, and Altmaier. Simply put, better competition, and Sinner has really never been threatened. Had a breaker against Kaboli, but that's basically it. I'll go for Sinner to win comfortably. I think he buries him. I think it's going to be ugly. I'll go 6-3, 6-3. So I'll go with Sinner minus the games here at 5.5 at plus 119. Don't feel great about the actual, once again, risk involved, but if you want to play it safer, maybe the under 19.5 at plus 106. That way you get yourself covered for a 6-3, 6-4. But I think Sinner buries him, like always. It's 11-0 in the head-to-head. Nothing else to add. At some point, when you get into the head-to-head for the dozenth time, and one guy wins every match, it's like Monfils against Djokovic or Gasquet against Nadal. There's only one side you're picking. And I feel like I'm going with that side here. Give me Sinner to repeat history and to beat de Minaur again for the 12th time in a row. Moving on to the next match, final match on the card, Musetti against Zverev, arguably the most even matchup on the card. Odds makers seem to agree. Zverev and Musetti are both around -110. For the over-under, 23.5. You can find 22.5, though, juiced over if you want to. For the over 2.5 sets, I see around +130. Straight sets, you have a bunch of big prices. Musetti straight sets is +220. Zverev in straight sets is +195. Now, Musetti, we know, has been good against Zverev in the past, at least better than you might think. However, I will point out that they faced off in Vienna, actually, last year, and Musetti won in 3. So Musetti's actually been in this exact spot before, and he won. He beat Zverev in 3 sets. Now, Musetti's actually 3-1 lifetime against Zverev. Zverev won the first meeting, courtesy of retirement in Madrid. Since then, Musetti beat him in the Olympics last year on clay in straight sets, Vienna last year in 3 sets, and Rome this year in straight sets. So we know Zverev has been quite underwhelming to expectation. We'll point out that Musetti won a very close battle last year. It wasn't a cruise in the 3rd set. He won 6-4. I'll point out the 2nd set breaker did end up going 7-5. In fact, Musetti was actually down love 40 in the 5-5 service game, and he fought off 4 break points, and he ended up winning the set and eventually the match. So Musetti was on the ropes against Zverev, found a way to survive, but Zverev has not really looked that impressive so far in the event. He's gotten better as it's going along. Musetti, though, has been really good. Now, Zverev had a fortunate bye in the quarters because Griekspoor ended up quitting, beat Arnaldi in straight sets, beat Fernley in a final set breaker. The Fernley win was concerning because he went to a breaker in the final set against a guy who was in free fall, basically. Arnaldi has not been that great this season, still was a close straight set win and a walkover in the quarters. Musetti, though, beat Mutet, beat Echeverry, beat Medjedovic all in straight sets. He looks really good. So for the actual value for me, we saw it last year. I think Musetti might be live. You can find some plus money if you shop around. I didn't mind the over for this one. Last year's match went to 3 sets. I see this one doing the same. Give me the over 2.5 sets. Zverev has not been that great confidence-wise for the last couple of months. Musetti has, especially on hard court. I think Musetti has the game to pull off the upset again for the 2nd straight year in this event against Zverev. Give me Musetti, but I don't mind the over. I see it being close either way. Give me the over 2.5 sets as well at +130. Anyway, it's going to wrap it up for the matchups on Saturday. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. Before we get into the lock and dog, reminder brought to you by our sponsor, Arnick Fantasy. Play Fantasy Pick'em. Chance to 5 times your entry to higher or lower in your favorite player stats. Once again, you can also mix and match your sports with tennis, baseball, hockey, basketball, you name it. But they also have a brand new offer for new customers. Play just $5, get $100 bonus funds. Use promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. They're off to a great start in college football and NFL picks and props, giving away a bunch of money weekly just for tracking your bets in the app. Track 5 bets of the same type of model that you built, and you can win $1K. And a reminder, we have a nice discount code with Rhythm. So you have to use the promo code SGPN25. We download the app. You'll get a quarter off first month. That Rhythm, once again, promo code SGPN25 for a quarter off your first month. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Cam Podcast. Finished going through the preview of the semifinal matchups taking place in Basel and in Vienna. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I'm going to go back to the Sinner match against de Minaur. I got to do it. Give me de Minaur team total under 8.5 at -125. Sinner is rolling at this point. We saw him in the Six Kings Slam, won comfortably every match, killed Alcaraz as well in the final. Showed up here, and it's been same as usual for Sinner on indoor hard courts. He's dominating. He's incredible, and it feels like nobody is worthy of being on the same court as him. Sinner, looking at the path so far, beat Altmaier. Altmaier won 2 games in the entire match. Faced off against Caboli. Caboli went to a breaker in the 2nd set. Still only won 8 games in the match, and then he ended up facing off against Bublik on Friday. And Bublik's a great server. Still only won 8 games. So every opponent for Sinner has won less than 9 games in the event so far. Sinner has won all 11 meetings. He's 11-0 in the head-to-head. And de Minaur has won less than 9 games in 6 of the last 8 meetings. One of the exceptions was last meeting. De Minaur played out of his mind. I think he has to raise his level dramatically, comparing what I've seen for the first couple rounds to the actual form he was in the last head-to-head meeting. I think Sinner buries him, simply put. And I do think Sinner winning in straight sets is about -260. So if you're picking him to coast like he did against Bublik, get a break early, hold serve every time, and eventually win, I think that's a pretty safe prediction for the match. Give me de Minaur team total under 8.5 as my lock at -125. For the dog, I'm going to go to the matchup between Fekina and Humbert. Said before, Fekina's great against lefties, but I do think I'll play the safer angle here. Give me Fekina, team total over 12.5 at plus 105. Fekina is 18-2 straight up in his last 20 matches against lefties. One of the losses, though, was to Humbert, so I am aware of that. That's why I'm kind of playing the safer angle for it. But there have been a bunch of long sets recently for Fekina. There's been a tiebreak in 6 straight Fekina matches. So a guy who's not really known for being a great server and a guy who's been a great returner for his entire career has randomly found himself in a bit of a surge tiebreaker-wise. And I do think with the courts here in Basel, you should see a fun battle. Couple ways to get there. Fekina gets revenge, ends up winning a close straight set battle. Maybe he loses in 3 or he wins in 3. Point is, I see a close matchup. Fekina has proven he's very good against lefties, and Humbert has been quite good lately, I'll admit it. But if the line feels expensive for Humbert money line-wise, I do think Fekina is more dangerous than the odds makers suggest, and I do think the team total is worth something of plus money for what should be a close matchup, in my opinion. So once again, the plays here for the lock and dog. The lock's going to be on de Minaur. Team total under 8.5 at minus 125. For the dog, I'm going to go with Fekina. Team total over 12.5 at plus 105. So we can wrap it up the show. Back once again for the final in Vienna and Basel. Till next time, find me on Twitter, Reichel Radio. Good